Girl, Woman, Other. This book, the 8th novel of the British author Bernardine Evaristo, has won the prestigious Booker Prize. And with this award, Bernardine Evaristo has been the first female black author who won this prize ever. We're here at the Bali in Amsterdam. The book has just been translated into Dutch by publisher De Geus. And we're going to talk with Bernardine Evaristo, who's going to be on Zoom tonight, and also with my Dutch guest, who I'm going to introduce to you later. But first, and we're going to talk about the book, of course, the impact of it, and also diversity in the literary world. But first of all, I want to welcome actress Jetty Mathurin, and she's going to read a story of the novel Girl, Woman, Other.
Tijdens haar eerste week telde ze de mensen met een donkere huidskleur op haar college, wat op 1 hand lukte, en zij was met stip het donkerst. In de statige eetzaal durfde ze nauwelijks op te kijken van haar bord met walgelijk prehistorisch eten, laat staan dat ze een gesprek aanknoopte. Ze hoorde andere herinneringen ophalen aan de slaapzalen en drugs op hun kostschool, kerstvakanties in Goa of op de Bahama's, aan hun tussenjaar waarin ze van Machu naar Picchu waren gewandeld of in Kenia een school voor arme kinderen hadden gebouwd, hoe ze in het weekend over de snelweg naar Londen scheurden, verhalen over feestjes, landgoederen, stedentrips naar Parijs, Kopenhagen, Praag, Dublin, in Vilnius. Waar is dat eigenlijk? Het merendeel van de studenten was niet zo, maar de ergste rijkeluis kindjes waren het meest luidruchtig en zelfverzekerd, dus dat waren de enige stemmen die ze hoorden. Zonder een woord tegen haar te zeggen, zonder überhaupt haar op te merken, ze had het gevoel dat ze een onbeduidende sloeber was. Niemand hing aan de grote klok dat ze was opgegroeid in een torenflat, in een gemeentecomplex met een alleenstaande moeder die schoonmaakster was. Niemand hing aan de grote klok dat ze nog nooit in een vliegtuig had gezeten, naar een toneelstuk of aan zee was of in een restaurant met bediening had gegeten. Niemand hing. Ze durfde amper oogcontact te maken als ze door de smalle gangen ging die lang geleden waren gebouwd toen mannen nog kleiner waren. Eeuwen voor er vrouwen werden toegelaten. Wat haar bij de introductie was verteld toen iedereen meteen vrienden leek te maken en zij met niemand praatte. Mensen liepen haar straal voorbij of keken dwars door haar heen of beelden ze zich dat in. Bestond ze eigenlijk wel of was ze een illusie? Als ik mijn kleren uittrek en naakt over de binnenplaats ren, zou iemand me dan opmerken, afgezien van de portiers die ongetwijfeld de politie zouden bellen. Ze zoeken al een goed excuus sinds ze haar voor het eerst zagen binnenkomen. Toen een student na een college naast haar kwam lopen om te vragen of ze ecstasy verkocht, had Carol bijna haar moeder ge-sms'd om haar te laten weten dat ze de eerstvolgende trein naar huis zou nemen. Na het eerste semester kwam ze in Peckham terug bij haar moeder met de boodschap dat ze wilde stoppen met haar studie, die ze weliswaar leuk vond en redelijk kon bijhouden, maar ze hoorde gewoon niet thuis op de universiteit. Ze ging niet terug. Ik ben er helemaal klaar mee, mama. Hè? Wat gaan we nou krijgen? Schreeuwde Boemie. Heb ik je nou goed verstaan? Of moet ik luciferstokjes in mijn oren stoppen om ze schoon te maken? Luister eens even goed naar mij, Carol Williams. Ten eerste, denk je soms dat Oprah Winfrey over de hele wereld de koningin van de televisie was geworden als ze de tegenslagen in haar jeugd niet had overwonnen? Ten tweede, denk je soms dat Diana Abbott de eerste zwarte vrouw in het parlement zou zijn geworden als ze er niet van overtuigd was geweest dat ze het recht had om de politiek in te gaan zodat ze haar gemeenschap kon vertegenwoordigen? Ten derde, denk je soms dat Valerie Amos de eerste zwarte barones van dit land zou zijn geworden als ze bij binnenkomst in het Hogerhuis in tranen was uitgebarsten omdat alleen maar oude witte mannen daar zaten?
Thank you so much, Jetty Mathurin. She's going back one more time to read another story from the book. And now I want to welcome Bernardine Evaristo. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm very good. And it was really lovely listening to Go Woman Other being read in Dutch.
Did it felt like it were your own words?
Well, there were subtitles, so that was good. But it's the first time my work has been read in Dutch, but also the first time I've heard anything from a novel in another language.
Okay.
So really interesting, yeah.
But it isn't the first time your novel has been translated.
This book is, there are 35 translations in process. Yeah.
That's a lot. And did you also receive, you just told me you received the translation?
I did. It arrived today. There we go. Lovely cover.
What did you thought about the cover?
I like it. It's nice. Yeah.
Well, let's start from the beginning. Where did the idea of your book start?
Yes. So I started the novel in 2013 and finished it in 2019, just before it was published, really. And I wanted to fill a novel with as many Black British women as possible, because I was just fed up of our absence in British literature. And actually, I hadn't written a book myself that was just full of Black women. So this is my eighth book. My first book was published in 1994. And I've written all kinds of stories, all kinds of characters, female protagonists. But I hadn't written a book that was, in a sense, a dedication to Black British women. And so that was the plan. And I thought, I'm going to put as many Black British women into a single novel as I can. And they are all going to be equal protagonists. And so that was the starting point.
So what were the challenges? Because I think it's not that easy to put a lot of women in one book, like 12 actually. Well, 11 women and one non-binary person.
Yes. Well, but you know, like I say, this is my eighth book, so I have written lots of characters, and I began in theatre in 1982. So I have a long history of writing lots of characters, and one of my previous books, called Lara, has multiple protagonists in it. So for me, the challenge wasn't really to have so many of these women. I can see that it might appear to be so, but that wasn't really the problem for me. It was more about just how the book was going to be structured and how they were going to be connected to each other, because you mustn't forget that they're all interconnected in some way.
Yes.
And also I just wanted them to be as diverse from each other as possible.
And there were also, I think there was a big theme about generation.
Yes, absolutely. So, by the way, I can see two of myself on here, but I can't see you anymore.
I'm going to. I think you just asked for that.
Thank you. Yes. So the other thing to say about the book is that it's multi-generational. So I wanted it to have a sort of epic feel to it. So the youngest character is 19 and she's called Yaz and she's a university student. And the oldest is Hattie, who is a farmer, and she's 93. And then I have women of every generation in between. But I also have every woman's childhood in their section. So each woman has her own section. And to a certain extent, I go back into the women's childhood, sometimes to the point of their birth.
Yes.
So the book spans so many generations. And also the one of the characters is born in the 19th century, so she's no longer living. So I actually go back to the 19th century. So it spans about 120 years. And there are also 4 mother-daughter relationships in the book. So it's also about that, the just sort of family dynamics. And the book is also about women who have different sexualities.
Yes.
So about a quarter of the women are on the queer spectrum. They have different cultural backgrounds. Some of them have origins in Africa, some of them in the Caribbean. One or two are immigrants, but the rest of them are British born. Some of them are what we call second generation. Some of them have ancestors going back more than one generation, and they have different kind of occupations. They are just all as distinct as I could make them, but also to have those interconnections between them.
It was really, really, really wonderful to read the book, and also all the different kind of characters. It also made me wonder, did you knew these people, or where did these characters came from?
Yeah, they come from my imagination. Some of them are kind of loosely based on people I have known. And so one of my goddaughters appears in the book, but she's not really her. Even when a character is inspired.
Which one?
Sorry?
Which character?
Oh, Yaz. So one of my goddaughters, when she was Yaz's age, had something of Yaz's quality. And I wanted to write a character, a young girl who was intelligent, feisty, outspoken, funny, and, you know, feeling that the world is somewhere where she can make her mark. And so my goddaughter's like that. She's now in her late 20s. So Yaz is kind of inspired by her.
Did she recognize herself in it?
Yeah, she always wants credits. She wants me to credit her because she's inspired a couple of other characters previously. And also Amma, who is the first character. She is kind of loosely based on my younger self when I was in my 20s. There's a character called Penelope, who is based on somebody I have known in the past who I don't actually like. So that was quite hard.
You don't like her.
I don't like her. To make Penelope likable when the person she was kind of, molded on is somebody I'm not particularly fond of.
Yeah, but is it important for you that all the characters are likable in a way?
I don't. Well, actually, that's interesting. I said likable, didn't I? I'm not really thinking about that. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create complex, rich, really dynamic, credible characters who come off the page and you feel as if you know them. That's what I'm going for. But when I say compassionate, I like to look at why people are the way they are, which is also why I go back into their childhoods, because I'm looking at their origins. I'm looking at how they have been shaped into the people that they become now. And so I think when you write from that perspective, the reader then understands the characters and kind of understands who they are, and that might make them more likable. But I don't think fictional characters have to be likable in any way. But I certainly would like my characters to be people that readers might warm to, for sure.
Yes. And, now about the Booker Prize. What did you... what is it meant for you to win that prize? Yeah.
It was just the most amazing evening. And, I shared it with, Margaret Atwood and I had the Booker Prize together. It wasn't half a prize. So sometimes people phrase it as if somehow it had been reduced because it was shared. But I don't feel like that at all, because this is a prize that is so important in the world. It is so impactful to win it, that to win it either on my own or with somebody else doesn't really make much difference to me, because I've won it. I've still won it.
Yes.
Right. And so, and that is a miraculous thing to happen for anybody. And so when it literally, the moment my name was read out, my life changed. This cliche, my life changed forever. Well, it really did change forever, because the prize is such a game changer. So overnight, I had gone from somebody who had been around a very long time, because I was 60 when I won the prize last year, right? So I've been writing since 1982 professionally, and I was known a little bit, and I got very good reviews. I'd won other awards, but winning the Booker meant that I became known in a global way. And also I've been treated differently ever since, and the media has just poured towards me and haven't stopped.
And how does that feel for you?
Oh, it's great. I love it. I love it. Yeah. The thing is, I can handle it. I've been around a long time, and I have been touring. I'm somebody who tours a lot as a writer. I've been to about 100, and I've done about 130 international gigs. So I'm very used to being in the kind of public domain, but I'm not used to having this big platform.
Yes.
So it's not like I'm a young person, 20, 30, even 35, who has been writing away quietly not for decades, for a while, and then they publish their first or second or third book, and suddenly everything explodes, and they find it hard to handle. I'm not like that, you know. I can handle it because I've been building, in a sense, towards this moment for so very long.
And were you surprised that it was specifically this book who won the prize?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's a sign of our times. Actually, can I ask you, should I be looking at the screen or looking at you?
Can you change the screen?
No, I just want to know, is it better if I look at you?
I think it is because people are going to see the same thing you are seeing at home. So when we're going to put only me on, then people will see me at home. So I don't think they are really they're not watching for me, actually.
So I could look at you rather than the camera.
It's okay, either way.
No, I'll look at the camera then.
Okay.
So what was the question, sorry?
Were you surprised that it was specifically this book?
Well, when I was writing the book, two things happened. The Me Too movement and also Black Lives Matter first time round, which was probably about 4 years ago now, maybe more. And so here I am writing this book about women's stories, Black stories, and these two movements happened. And there was a cultural shift, for sure. And also a whole generation of people have grown up with social media and have become very powerful on it and use it as a way to use it as a platform for their ideas, to communicate their ideas, to collaborate and to become a powerful lobby. And so that applies to Black women in Britain in particular, maybe in America, maybe in Holland. Suddenly it was like people weren't so dependent on the establishment and the mainstream to communicate to each other and to have this platform. And so it suddenly felt as if Black women's stories and Black stories in Britain were something that people were interested in. Whereas when I started writing the book, there still wasn't much interest in the kinds of stories that I write and Black women's stories. One or two exceptions, but generally not a lot of interest. And suddenly it became very topical because of these two movements. And then the Booker Prize itself, which of course, as we know, has been a very traditional prize for a very long time. It's now in its 51st year, and the sort of the director, who is quite new to the prize, had a panel of 5 people, 4 of whom were women, and 2 of whom were women of color. That's never happened before, right? And so everything was shifted. Everything had been kind of like the stars had aligned for my book to be published into a different kind of culture. And then to have that panel of judges, because judges are always about the people who are sitting in the jury, the people who are making the decisions, right? And every year it changes. And my year, I have these 4 powerful women and a bloke, and then they decide that my book is the one to get it. So I think that's how it happened. But let's not forget that when the book was first published, which was May 2019, it felt as if it was going to be the same as my other books. I got some amazing reviews, and it was selling a little bit, but it wasn't breaking through. And it was only when it began that journey to the Booker and then winning the Booker that suddenly everything changed.
Well, I think we have to, I want to invite the other guests. So you already tiptoed on some themes that also want to discuss with the other guests. So I wanted to welcome Grâce Ndjako, author and philosopher. You write a lot about African and Afro-Caribbean philosophy, and you just published a short story in the book Afrolit. It's here. And Maaike Meijer, literary scholar and emeritus professor of gender studies. You were active in different feminist activist groups in the 70s and 80s, such as Paarse September. Also welcome to you. Grâce, to begin with you, what was the impression you had? What was the impression of the book?
No, this was the first book I read by Evaristo, and first of all, it was in a very different style than the novels I usually read. So I really enjoyed it for that reason also, because it was, and normally. And also, the fact that it's about all of these different black women of different generations that really appealed to me.
Mm-hmm. And Maaike Meijer, you also enjoyed it a lot.
Yes,
How come?
I enjoyed it a lot. I lived with it for a week with this book. I found it really amazing, and I heard. I enjoyed, of course, the book itself, all the different lives, the way in which they are interconnected. I found it, so much more than literature, because it's also a history of racism. It is as if you wrote 12 books in this one book.
Yeah.
So I was, I was amazed. I heard a lot of echoes of other writers. I sometimes had a feeling Audre Lorde was talking to me, or Toni Morrison, or Sarah Waters in the Victorian orphanage part, Janet Winterson, Michael Cunningham, but then you do something else, of course, something unique and much more. In the beginning, I thought you are going to try to put as many lesbians in one novel as you possibly can, which I found wonderful. And then I thought, oh, this is a competition. Most white writers try to put as many white men in their novels as they possibly can. So you make a competition out of this. But I really found it a wonderful book. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the review. We also have the translator here. So before we're going to continue this talk, I wanted to ask the translator, how was it for you to translate it into Dutch? Oh, sorry, I forgot to say a letter. Yeah.
What was it like? It was challenging, to say the least.
What did you find challenging about it?
When I started reading even, because I think it was wonderful, Maaike just said, I lived with it for a week. Well, I lived it for 5 or 6 months, if not longer. Lived and breathed it. At first I thought, when I was reading it, I thought it's the lack of commas, commas are there, but the lack of capital letters and full stops, just the whole layout, the punctuation. But in the end, it was more to do with the themes, really, because as a white heterosexual translator, I thought, am I even the right person to be doing this at some point? And
there was also a lot of slang in the book.
There's a lot of slang.
Also typical English slang. So
yes.
How was it for you to translate
well, there was even
Getting to Dutch.
some pidgin English or Nigerian English. I actually tried. I really tried to find a person of Dutch Nigerian descent that I could talk to see which kinds of words would you use from Nigerian that would still be.
And you also found one, or you?
I didn't.
You didn't.
I did not. Maybe I didn't look hard enough, but my deadline was pulled up. So in the end, I didn't really have time to do those kinds of things. But I did talk to non-binary people, and because that was another challenge.
The pronouns?
Evaristo uses, I don't know if she's still here, but uses they, of course, which in English is quite common. It doesn't look weird at all. But in Dutch, we're still not quite sure what to use. So I had to choose between, well, many options. And in the end, I decided to use hen, because the transgender network had a whole, well, not a competition, well, they had an election to see which was the preferred pronoun for non-binary people.
There are still different options.
Exactly, and I'm still not sure. I mean, it's different from the English anyway, but there were plenty of challenges other than the
Bernardine
punctuation.
Evaristo, are you still with us? Somewhere?
Yeah.
Okay, because we couldn't see you.
Yeah, but where is?
Okay.
There she is.
How does it? How is it for you to listen to this? The difficulties with the translation.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Yeah, really interesting actually, because well, talking to Lette. I've never talked to somebody who's translated my work before, so it's really interesting to hear about your challenges. And I think that applies to my work generally, that I use a lot of vernacular, I'm experimental, I make up words, not in this book, I don't make up words I think in this book, but I do in my film. And I think it all makes it quite difficult to translate. But also the fact that you spent so long on it, you said 5 or 6 months. It's like, this is a major project.
Quick.
And then to have to deal with what I call fusion fiction, right? Which is not proper sentences. I can see that it could be really, really challenging. And each woman has her, even though the characters are written in the third person, it's like you do hear their voices. And each one has their own kind of vocabulary and sort of cadence and idioms and so on. So well, thank you very much anyway for translating it, but I can see that it's challenging. And then just to talk to Maaike, is that how you say it?
Thank you, Lette Vos.
Yes, Maaike. Yeah.
Maaike, yes. You know the whole thing about the queer characters, because I thought, I'm not going to create a heteronormative novel. There are 12 characters, right? And it felt really appropriate that at least one should be non-binary or trans, and so that's why I put one character there. But then I thought I want women to be basically on the queer spectrum in different ways, because I think that's also true to life, and I didn't want it to be a token gesture, right?
Yeah.
So you have like one maybe lesbian character and that's it. So it's really, the sexuality of the women is, and the way in which that is sort of the diversity of it is really embedded in the novel, almost from beginning to end. But at the same time, the women all have different kind of attitudes and points of view, and they're not all feminist. And certainly there's some sort of homophobic undertones going on as well, because that also felt true to life.
Yeah. Oh yes, I found that sometimes very moving when Bumi, for example, starts to fall in love with Omofe, but she cannot bring herself into accepting that she could love a woman. That's wonderful. But I was wondering if you have not felt sometimes a problem, a kind of struggle between your political agenda on the one hand and your literary agenda on the other hand. I appreciate it very much that you just started, with lesbian scenes, lesbian characters, discussions as they were held in the 70s. Are you becoming too mainstream now, working for the National Theatre? Are you a sellout and things like that? I recognize these discussions very much from my own lesbian past and present. But in the 70s in Amsterdam, it sounded utterly realistic to me. To me, it was very much a credible, live world. And that you begin the novel with this world, and gradually all sorts of other characters, heterosexual romances, and so on, but that you go against what you sometimes see in other writers. Oh, let's put one lesbian character in somewhere in chapter 5. That's not what you do. You challenge in a kind of deconstructive move. I have to turn the old schemes totally around, otherwise it will not work. I appreciate that you dared to do this.
Yes, so initially the character who started the novel was Carol. So Carol was the first person I wrote. Yeah. And she was going to be at the beginning of the novel, and her section with Carol and her mother and her friend were going to be the first threesome. Yeah. And then I decided against that, because for anybody who's read the novel, Carol undergoes this trauma as a 13-year-old child. Yeah. And I didn't want that to set the tone for the novel, you know, and in a way it's too easy to do that, because when you put that kind of experience at the beginning of a novel, it's a very easy way to get the reader emotionally involved. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like a trick. But also, I didn't want the book to begin as some kind of tragedy, as if these women are suffering, because this book is not about suffering, right? It's about their lives, and their lives are very rich, and there's lots of aspects to them. And so, but sometimes people think, because you have all these black women in a novel, it's about some kind of tragedy, right?
Yeah.
There's
Of course.
And I also
but I was asking something else, or I want to ask something else about this possible friction between a political and a literary agenda. When I am not a literary writer, but if I imagine to write a novel about lesbian life, I would have trouble of not idealizing it, because in the 70s we said lesbians do not have a problem, they have a solution. So sometimes that you want to show off this solution is tempting, but you don't do this at all. And I admire that you resist the temptation to idealize lesbian relations as different. This is a new world. Let's do it that way. We are much better than you. You don't do it. You do not do it. But you do not also fall in the opposite.
But did you have a
abyss.
temptation, actually?
Yes. So basically, so just to go back to what I was saying, so with Carol, I then replaced her with Amma. And the reason I replaced her with Amos is because I thought that I wanted to write about the 80s, about lesbians. I was very much part of the lesbian sort of countercultural community in London in the 80s. I'm not a lesbian anymore, but I was then for about 10 years. And I really wanted to put that, I really wanted to challenge the reader with that and to bring that to the light, because people don't know about us and how we were then, and the kind of communities that we were part of, and creativity and stuff. So I thought, okay, I'm going to put the lesbian right at the beginning. And that's going to set the tone for the novel, that you're going to start reading a novel and you're going to encounter characters you might not have read before. And then, of course, we get to Dominique and Nzinga. And they're incredibly...
It was my favorite chapter.
I found it wonderful.
Yes, but you see...
Chilling.
What I find really interesting is that people who don't really know about lesbian relationships find that surprising. You know, they say to me, oh my God, that's such a, You know, she's what's the word? She's a control freak, and the power dynamic is all wrong. And coercive control, that's the word.
Yeah.
She's practicing coercive control,
Yeah.
but it's two women. It's not supposed to be like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, why? You don't know about these relationships, so why do you mythologize lesbian relationships and think that everything, like you're saying, Maaike, everything's perfect and we're all happy and we're not part of the patriarchy.
Oh no.
You know, but actually everything goes on well, maybe not in the same way, but the power dynamics are still there in all kinds of relationships.
Yeah. Well, there are of course a lot of abusive men being paranoid, jealous, not letting their wives and daughters out and things like that. Then we are not surprised. But when Zinga does it, but I appreciated that a lot.
I also want a quick question to the audience. Who has read the book? Okay. So then it's not really a problem that because maybe you can't see it, but almost everyone here in the audience.
I can't see the audience.
Yeah. So I will tell you that almost everyone read the book. So.
Okay.
So, Bernardine, in The Guardian you said, these are unprecedented times for Black female writers. Why do you think so?
Yes, I did. I wrote an essay for The Guardian called What a Time to be a Black British Womxn, WOMXN writer. Because so many books have been published in the last few years in the UK. I have to say, mainly non-fiction, books by Black British women. And they're non-fiction, and they're talking about their lives and the things that are important to them. And we haven't had that before in this country. Yeah. I think we've definitely done better than from Van Hollen, from what I understand. Yeah. I mean, the first anthology that I was in was one that I was one of the editors of in 1984, called Black Women Talk Poetry. But certainly, in terms of the sort of world of ideas and ideologies and life experiences in books, Black British women haven't been that present in non-fiction. And now, suddenly, there are all these books coming out. So one of them is, you might have heard of, I'm sure it's translated into Dutch, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. Yeah. There's Brit-ish by Afua Hirsch. There's Loud Black Girls that's just come out, and Slay in Your Lane. There are probably about 20 or 30 books that have come out in the last few years. So it feels like suddenly we are becoming a voice in this country.
Grâce, do you also feel like that it are unprecedented times for Black female writers?
Well, I don't think it's really the case in the Netherlands. Like it's just starting, because like what she's saying, that they already had their first Black female anthology in the 80s. We had in the Netherlands we had an anthology by Black writers, not just Black writers in general. Just a couple of years ago, Zwart, and this year Afrolit came out, the second collection of a collection of short stories by Black Dutch authors, and well, it's just the fact that it's only the second one shows that we're really just starting here, and I also got the impression that in Holland it's not always treated as seriously as it should, because, for example, when critics have the tendency to just look at it as another book about race, instead of treating it as a work of literature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you also felt like that when people wrote this book, Afrolit? There's a short story of you in it.
Oh yeah, but the reviews were better this time. It's in the sense that critics paid attention to the literary quality of it, and not just look how nice it is that Black authors are writing. So that's an improvement from last time, I guess.
May I say
Yes.
something? But we have a fantastic author of a Surinamese background, Astrid Roemer.
Yeah.
She is amazing. And she wrote this trilogy, Onmogelijk Moederland, Impossible Motherland. It's 3 novels. It's a history of Suriname and the connections between the Netherlands and Suriname. A lot of characters with a lot of historical depth also. It goes back into the 19th century. And she got the PC Hoofdprijs, God bless her, which is the biggest literary prize in the Netherlands. She got it 2 years ago.
But she also got a lot of backlash.
Sorry?
She also got a lot of backlash from it.
Can you tell us a little bit about the backlash?
That was just as amazing, Bernardine, as you getting the Booker Prize in Dutch dimensions, because the PC Hoofdprijs was never given to a black person at all, let alone a black woman. And I have the feeling that Astrid Roemer's work is somehow not received enough, read enough, discussed enough.
You said she also got a lot of backlash.
There was also backlash about it. There were people accusing, saying that she only got it because she was a black woman. So saying that they just want to show that they're diverse, which is of course.
But people always say that. So okay.
Yeah, but this tends to be. This tends to be more so the case when a black woman wins something or whatever.
Yeah.
Then it's then suddenly people start to question whether it was based on merit or based on a political agenda.
I think that was only one strand in the critical reaction. I've also spoken to a lot of people who for the first time started to read Astrid Roemer. So she is an enormous literary example. And so, I mean, you're not alone. There are building blocks to work from, so to speak.
I'm not saying I've never said that we were alone. I'm just saying that we're just in the Netherlands. We're in baby steps. We're just it's still.
But I also think that you
from...
think we are moving with baby steps because when you wrote an article about women in the literature, and you also compared it with a pay cap.
Oh yes, but I wrote an article about the drama of literary prizes in the Netherlands, which are always given to men. I think that the UK is very much ahead of us, although the Booker has also a history of always being given to men. But right now, all important literary prizes are given to men. Even when there are excellent female writers who are of great literary stature, who just do not get those prizes. That was my latest article about.
Yeah, and there was also now the nominations for the Booker Prize this year are announced. What did you thought about the nominations, Bernardine?
Well, it was interesting. Just to go back to the conversation that's just been had, I think I agree with. Sorry, I'm not very good with the name. Grace. Grace.
It's pronounced the French way. Grâce.
Grâce. I agree with Grâce that there is always a backlash. You know, when people of colour do well, and that also applies to the literary world, and so. People do then accuse the prizes, the juries of political correctness when it goes to a person of colour. I mean, that isn't a big thing in this country at the moment, but it has definitely been in the past.
Yeah.
And so if you don't get the prizes, if you don't do well, they assume it's because you're not good enough. Mm-hmm. And if you do well and get the prizes, they say, oh, it's just to tick in the diversity boxes.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with somebody on a television programme probably about 2 months ago, and she was literally saying this thing, that you know, when the prizes are going to people from marginalized communities, it's about ticking boxes. I mean, it is the most insulting thing you can say to anybody. It's never about, they never see it as being about the quality of the prizes. The quality of the writing. So in terms of the literary culture in Holland, I find it really shocking that these prizes are going to men, actually, because I would suggest that in the UK today, it is so much more balanced.
Yes, I think so too, yes.
In terms of women and in terms of people of colour. People of colour have done quite well with prizes for quite a while. They just haven't done well with the Booker. So the Booker Prize, the Booker Prize this year had 6 shortlisted authors, and so 4 of them were writers of colour. So 2 African women, an Asian woman, and an American guy. 2 queer guys, so a Scottish guy who won for Shuggie Bain, which is a wonderful, wonderful book. He's a Scottish queer writer, and the book is a queer novel. And Brandon Taylor, who's written a queer campus novel from a black perspective in America, and a white woman who's writing about climate change. So it was an incredible shortlist, in terms of the kinds of voices.
And about that backlash, in the Dutch newspaper, the Volkskrant, journalist wrote that it felt for him as if they didn't make a choice based on quality, but that the diversification of literary voices was the goal of this year.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because when it's not dominated by white writers, middle class, probably middle-aged white writers, preferably more men than women, then somehow it is, as you actually say, the critics were saying, it's about not judging the work on the quality of the work. And so the establishment does not like it when marginalized voices do well. But actually, if you look at the Booker Prize over the last few years, Marlon James, Jamaican American, won it in 2015. Paul Beatty, Black American, won it the next year. Anna Burns, Northern Irish writer, won it the year before last. Myself and Margaret Atwood, 2 women, strong feminist novels, won it last year. This year, queer Scottish writer. So are these critics saying that all these juries are just being politically correct? Or what they're ignoring is the fact that actually these voices that haven't been heard much of are injecting literature with something new, something different, something fresh, and that's why they're rising to the fore, right?
Yeah.
Maaike?
Well, literature should be universal, but as long as it's only about white men or white people, it can never be universal. So finally, literature is becoming universal because there are other characters, other stories, other traditions, other faces to be heard. I think sometimes the old arguments should be turned around much more brutally. We should say when man gets a literary prize, like the Libris Prize last year, which did not go to Manon Uphoff, which was really a scandal. So the man wins it. Nobody says, you won it because you are a man. Which is true. There was a dissertation written recently. It's called "This is not a woman's book." The woman researched that and gave a lot of computer analysis even, that the reaction of people when they know that it's a male writer, they value the book higher, just because they know the writer is male. And it has been proven now. So that's how it works. There are ideas about men's novels, male writers. So male writers are always described in literary terms, complex plots, style. And women writers are always described in terms of a domestic novel, female this and that. So these labels are very gendered, and they are only used for women, gendered labels, with a negative load, whereas male writers are judged much more neutrally and much more professionally. So men are valued higher because they are men. That's how it works.
Let me just say something about John Banville, who was in the news yesterday. So John Banville won the Booker Prize in 2004 with his novel The Sea. He is a white writer. And yesterday he was interviewed, and he said that he wouldn't win the Booker today because he's a straight white man, and they don't give straight white men, right? Which is a ridiculous thing to say. Martin Amos, who's a very big writer in Britain, has been celebrated for a very long time, recently said in the summer, when he was asked whether he's read any of the recent Booker winners, he said no, because he says he suspects they're like sociological texts. That's how he describes it.
Yes.
So we are living in a culture where your work, the quality of your work is being diminished if you're a female writer by certain communities. If you're a female writer, and also if you're a black woman writer, then it's kind of like a double whammy. Yeah. And I think it's just that the status quo does not like to be disrupted. And so, but I think there is such a groundswell of support now for all of these voices that haven't been heard enough of for so long, that I think the people who are opposing the ways in which we're becoming successful are being shown up as dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Grâce.
Well,
wait one moment, because a voice that we didn't hear this evening so much is Grâce. And I'm wondering, do you feel safe actually in this literary world?
Well, I just entered it, so I don't know. Because this is my first story that was published. So far, I feel safe enough, but I don't know if it will change in the future, because I do of course, talk to other Black authors and Black creators, and there's also always a fear of your work not being understood, not only misunderstood, but also looked at it in a certain way. Like we talk a lot about the white gaze and what it can do as not only as a person, but like if you're also a creative, it also adds another dimension to it, I guess.
Because I also ask it a little bit because I really enjoyed your story in Evrolit, and in the story you said that it was difficult. Well, I don't know if I say it. Maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but that it was difficult to share stories, also personal stories, because you feel like people don't understand them, and they even capture it. What did you mean by that?
So the short story I wrote is like a letter to. It's in the form of a letter to a friend, and this friend is another Black woman, and. Because it's basically a story about stories, stories about Black stories, and about the meaning of our stories when I'm talking about Black people. But then also what happens with those stories later. Because in the story, I tell a story to my friend, and then I also, to this fictional friend, and then I explain to her how the story had been received in the past and treated in the past, when I would try to explain it to white friends or acquaintances or whatever, and how when they would ask me questions about the story I had told them or discussed it, how I tended to disappear from the story. Like it wasn't about me or what I experienced anymore. I don't know if it comes across well, because maybe it's a bit vague.
Do I understand that it's a meta story? So it's a story about itself? It's a story about its own reception?
Yeah, because in the letter, I tell my friend the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then I talk to and I tell her how. So what happened? So I tell the story of what happened, how it affected me, and then I later tell how it. What happened in the aftermath, what happened later when I told the story to other people. And so, because then there was, so I try, what I try to explain then is also how easy it is for these stories, which I see as a story as a life, like when I tell my friend about, we've shared stories in the past, and it's like these stories are our lives. It's our lives on paper, but how easy it is for these stories to get grabbed and then for it to turn for us to disappear from the narrative, and basically the life being taken away from the story.
Bernardine, do you recognize what Grâce is saying?
Not really, sorry.
About is it possible? Are you also thinking about how your story and also personal stories are received? And does the story change? Do you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Are you talking about my fiction?
Yes. Well, now actually she wasn't. She was talking about her own story. Grâce was talking about her own story. But now I'm asking you if you are also thinking about how your story is received, and if it's not your story anymore when other people are reading it, or what other people do.
Okay. So when I'm writing, I try not to think of an audience or the readership, because I find if I do, then they become sort of like critics in my mind telling me what to write. And as a writer, I give myself total artistic freedom to write anything I like from any perspective. And I want it to be my work, and there is integrity in me writing the story that I want to write. If I start to think about potential readers, then they will start to shape the work, and I don't want them to shape the work. At the same time, when I'm writing something, I'm not just writing it for myself. So it's coming from me, but I'm not just writing it for myself. I have an awareness that this is work that's going to be communicated out there to the wider public, whoever's going to read it. But I'm just not thinking about a particular kind of readership. Now, certain writers will be thinking about their readership, such as crime writers or thriller or romance or whatever, because those genres are very kind of directed in that way. Whereas with me, I think the book will land where it lands. That's how I describe it. So I write a book, it's published, and it lands where it lands. Once it lands with the readers, I then get a sense of how the book is doing. I get it from the critics and their response, which is often very considered, very informed, and can be quite judgmental. But I get it from the readers I encounter, and the people who send me letters, and I get it, especially now on social media. I get all kinds of responses to my work. Mm-hmm. And mainly those responses, what I find really interesting with this book in particular is that it has reached a massive readership now. It's gone beyond what my normal readership might be, out into the mass market, right? So what we call Middle England is reading this book. And all kinds of people who might not have picked up my book are reading it because it won the Booker.
Yeah.
And it's also good doing well word of mouth. And so then I'm getting their responses to it, which I find really fascinating, because people do say things like, oh, I learned so much and I found it really educational. and then they think I am writing to educate them, and I'm not. I'm not an educationalist. I'm writing to tell the stories that I want to put out there into the world. And then if people find it informative, that's good. So I do get people relating to the book from different perspectives. And I find it so fascinating that I get lots of white writers relating to the book. And also, for example, older white men come up to me when I was doing live events, come up to me and tell me they got a lot from the book. So I think what I understand from this book is that it talks about our shared humanity. Right,
yes.
Which I think was what Maaike was talking about. Yeah. So through the specifics of the characters and their stories and the journeys they go on in the novel, through that we understand these truths about humanity, and then people are connecting to the book in that way, but in lots of different ways. So the other thing about the book is about class. It is about lots of different things. Yeah. It's about family, it's about relationships, it's about work, it's about migration. Yes, race is there. It's also about feminism, it's about gender, but it's also about class. So I've had people talking to me about their struggles with being working class in middle class environments, and then they connect to it on that level. So yes, I no longer own. Well, you never do anyway when you're a writer. You do not own the responses of your readers and how they choose to contextualize your work. So, like, an academic, for example, will read a lot into my work, and I love it because they're just digging deep.
Yeah, we got an academic here on the table too, actually.
Yes, I know. They're digging deep into the deeper meanings and what it's really about and what's going on. And when they tell me what's going on, I think, oh, that's interesting, because I don't know. Right? But they think of that.
Well, I'm reading a lot of Charles Dickens into your book.
Oh, okay.
And the grande finale with the reuniting of, I will not tell of whom with whom, otherwise it's a spoiler, but that was really such a surprise. Amazing. This mother-daughter united suddenly, finding each other. It's also Alice Walker all over again, in a way, but it was wonderful.
Okay,
really.
I think right now, thank you, Maaike, we have to listen to another story from, I want to welcome Jetty Mathurin again. And this is going to be a story from Amma.
Zo, Ik ben een beetje afgeleid. Waar zit hij? Oké. Emme nam een slok van haar 7e kop koffie van die dag. Deze keer met een flinke scheut dramboe erin, terwijl Sylvester aan een bierflesje lurkte. Volgens hem de manier waarop revolutionaire bier hoorde te drinken. Hij stond nog steeds aan het hoofd van het socialistisch theaterschap, de 97%, zoiets, dat op alternatieve locaties en in moeilijk bereikbare wijken optrad. Wat zij ook had moeten blijven doen. Emme, je zou je stukken in buurthuizen en bibliotheken moeten opvoeren. Niet voor dat stelletje kleinburgerlijke kloothommels in het National. Maar de laatste keer dat een stuk van haar in een bibliotheek was opgevoerd, bestond het publiek voornamelijk uit slapende, erger nog, snurkende daklozen. Dat was zo'n 15 jaar geleden en ze had gezworen dat nooit meer te doen. Maatschappelijke betrokkenheid is belangrijker dan succes. Ambitie is sowieso volksziekte nummer 1, zei Sylvester, terwijl hij op haar kosten het ene na het andere biertje wegtikte. Ik zie die Sylvester daar staan, jongen, zo. Tja, nu je bent doorgebroken, zal je wel dik verdienen, probeerde Emma hem tevergeefs aan zijn verstand te brengen. Dat ze het volste recht had om de stap naar omvangrijke projecten te zetten. Ze zei dat ze zelf mocht weten of ze een stuk wilde regisseren bij het Nationaal Theater en dat hun taak was om te zorgen dat het publiek niet alleen uit gegoede dagjes mensen uit Londen en omgeving bestond, waarbij ze hem nog er eventjes op wees dat zijn ouders, respectievelijk gepensioneerd bankier en huisvrouw op Berkshire, tot die categorie behoorden en ook naar Londen kwamen om cultuur te snuiven. Ouders die hem altijd hadden gesteund, zelfs toen hij als tiener uit de kast kwam. In een dronken bui had hij er een keer uitgeflapt dat ze hem nog maandelijks geld overmaakte. Ze was veel te aardig om hem dat onder de neus te wrijven. Een beetje herrie schoppen langs de zijlijn is allemaal leuk en aardig, zei ze. Maar we moeten juist bij de grote gesubsidieerde instellingen het verschil proberen te maken. Daar gaan onze belastingcenten toch naartoe. Sylvester trok een zelfgenoegzaam gezicht, alsof hij er erg stoer voor stond dat hij geen belasting betaalde. De mijne tegenwoordig in ieder geval wel, zei ze. En jij zou ook gewoon je steentje moeten bijdragen. Met lodderige oogjes van het bier leunde hij achterover en keek haar misprijzend aan, vol ingehouden walging. Ze kende die blik. Ze kende die blik die alcohol bracht, een valse kant in haar goede vriend naar boven, die hij anders niet had. Geef nou maar toe, Amy, je hebt je principes laten varen ten behoeve van je eigen ambities en nu ben je mainstream met hoofdletter M, zei hij. Je hebt ons de rug toegekeerd. Ze stond op, pakte haar tas met haar Afrikaanse print en vertrok. Iets verderop in de hoofdstraat keek ze om en zag hem geleund tegen de muur van Café Ritzy een checkie rollen. Nog altijd een cheque. Blijf jij maar lekker in het verleden hangen, Sylvie.
Thank you so much, Jetty Mathurin. I think the publisher is home because of he had to take a corona test. But the publisher is at home. But if he wants the audio, also an audiobook, I think he has to call you because it's wonderful to hear you read the story. Bernardine, I was wondering, do you recognize the discussion between Amma and Sylvie yourself from your own life?
It's interesting because I think the novel is about how these women, they're all ambitious in different ways, maybe not the beginning of their careers, but eventually they become ambitious. And the novel is really about how they get to where they're going, right? Mm-hmm. As much as it's about anything else. And the Amma story, people do then say, is life imitating art, right? Because I have a similar background to Amma in some ways, and I'm now at the heart of the establishment, and I really am at the heart of the establishment. And I have been working my way into the establishment for some time, and I don't see being inside the establishment as a sellout, as a cop-out. If you stay hold of your principles, right? So my principles are about inclusion, egalitarianism, making our society a better society for those groups who are usually alienated and marginalized and underrepresented. So I use my position inside the establishment to make a difference, right? I'm a professor at a university. I'm one of the vice presidents of the Royal Society of Literature. I have all these associations that are very establishment. Mm-hmm. But with each of them, I am making a difference within those institutions. Amma has a show on at the National Theatre of Great Britain, right? So this is a really big deal. It's a play she's written, and it's a play she's directed, and it's a black women's play, and it's a queer play, and it's about Amazon fighters from Dahomey from the 19th century. Okay, so it's in every way possible, it's radical, but she's inside the establishment. But the fact that she's inside the establishment means that some people can't handle it. Mm-hmm. Because they think you need to stay away from the establishment. Well, my feeling is that if you are somebody who believes in a progressive society, you can't stay outside the walls of the citadel all the time. Mm-hmm. Yes, you can make a lot of noise outside the walls of the citadel. So, for example, Grâce, the book I mentioned, Black Woman Taught Poetry, that we published in 1984, we published it ourselves. We formed a publishing house and we published it ourselves. Today, I'm published by Penguin Random House, which is a massive multinational publishing company. But it began on the outside. Now I'm on the inside. And I think we need to be in both places.
Yeah.
We need to be outside, and we need to be we need to be changing the power structures from within. And in a way, that's what Amma is dealing with in terms of her own career.
Yeah. Grâce, this book, Afrolit, is published in it's a publisher.
Yeah.
And it's a collaboration with Pluim, but it's also...
it's a collaboration between the publishing house Pluim, but also Dipsaus Podcast, which is... so it's a podcast by 3 black women, and they collaborated with uitgeverij Pluim, publishing house Pluim, to publish this book.
And do you think change has to come like from outside of the establishment, or do you also think it can come?
It can come from within, because one of the women from Dipsaus podcast, Ebise Rao. So she also works with Pluim, and she has worked with several other publishers in the past. And it's thanks to her being in the establishment that this book was able to be published, and that these kind of initiatives, other books, similar books, are being published.
So you have to collaborate.
Well, you have to find someone who has a foot in the door, like someone like Ebise, yeah.
I want to go to the audience. Are there any questions? Not yet? Yes, okay. Can you go to...
Hi, thank you all, first of all. To the professor, do you know of any studies, because you mentioned a study where it was said that the men are prescribed in these literary terms, like professionals, and women sort of as, well, sort of nice that she's writing. Do you know of any studies that are done for people of color and white people in this same literary world?
As I said, there is a recent PhD. It's a Dutch scholar. She's called Corina Koole, K-O-O-L-E. And the book is called, it's an English dissertation. This is not a woman's book. And she has analyzed, among many other things, the reception of 500 novels by men, women, translated novels, original Dutch novels. She also reflects ethnicity, so she also compares reactions of white writers and writers of color. There's a lot of focus on gender. So this is a recent book. I reviewed it in my Trouw article.
And what did she say about color? The reception of stories from people of color?
The results there were not as dramatic as the comparison of men and women. So the denigrating remarks against male writers of color were much less. So there's somehow there's a difference. Yeah. Okay. It's a complicated study, so I cannot repeat it here. I do it justice. But
Another question from the audience.
Hi, thank you. My name is Naida. It's actually not a question, but it reminded me of something. I was walking last year in the library, not in a bookshop in Den Haag, the city of The Hague, and there was the book of Murat Işık, who won several prizes in Holland. But it was in the section of translated literature. So I asked the manager of the bookshop, why did you put the book here? And then he said, can't you see the name, Murat Işık? That is Holland. And I have many more stories like this.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Bernardine. I was wondering, a few months ago, I was reading your book and I had a conversation with someone about, well, the lack of commas and stuff. And I was wondering, is there a special reason that you, why did you do that? Because I was talking to her and she said, I don't know which author, but she said she knew an author that was a black woman, and she decided to not use a lot of punctuation because it was kind of like she didn't want to have to prove herself that she could use like proper grammar and stuff because, from personal experience, people always say like, oh, your Dutch is so great. Just because I'm not white, that doesn't mean, I can't speak properly. So I was wondering, what is your reason for that?
That's a very interesting take on it, I have to say. I call it fusion fiction, right? And I think it's a term I've invented, which means that there aren't many full stops and there aren't many capitals, and it's an intentional literary device, right? Because I felt it was a very free-flowing way to write this novel. I had used it in my previous book, Mr. Loverman, with one of the characters, and it felt just very liberating to write without having to worry about full stops. And also because I understand most people have read the book in the audience, so it has what I call a pro-poetic patterning on the page. So I don't really see the book as poetry. I see it as a bit like poetry, so that the breathing spaces that you need are there in the gaps in the text, right? And through that form, I was able to really get deep inside the characters' lives. That's how I feel. And I was able to compress their lives in a way that you can do through poetry, because poetry is brilliant for compressing things. And so I get deep inside their lives, and I can be inside their heads and their minds and their psyches and their hearts, but you're also kind of outside their lives as well. So the two things are going on at the same time. I'm also able to shift from the past to the present. Voices come in, their voices, each individual character, you hear their voices and they come in, but also the voices of other characters. And all of that was possible because I was able to write it in this form. And then there are the 12 stories, and the form, I think, allows me to float along the subconscious of each character, so that the reader starts floating when they read this book in this form. And then before they know it, they're in another character's life, and they're deep inside their life, and they're seeing them from the outside and the inside. You go into the past, the present, the voices are coming in, and then you go to the next character and the next character. So it's a very intentional device, and it's absolutely nothing to do with trying to prove myself, right? But I am an experimental writer, and all my books in some ways are an experiment. And what I think happens with this book, so two more things. One is that I think it challenges the form of the novel, because it's doing something different with it. Even having 12 co-protagonists is doing something different with the novel. So it's kind of subverting and challenging the traditional form of the novel. The other thing is that I think, because I don't have orthodox punctuation, that I think that the structure kind of disappears and you're just in the story. It's almost, this might sound strange, it's almost as if the language disappears and you're just in the story. And if I had written it in, if I'd written it in conventional sentences and paragraphs, I think the novel would have been constrained and imprisoned, and it wouldn't be the kind of book that it is.
Thank you.
I'm very happy that we are talking about this now, because it was one of the features of your novel that struck me the most, that you slip into the lyrical mode. You use other forms than grammatical sentences. You start to put words under on separate lines so that they get more, so that you start to read them in a lyrical way. This text starts to breathe. It's the breathing of your style, what you do there. And in the beginning you have to get used to it, but you have to surrender as a reader that this is how it works in this book. And since that's the world you live in for a week, you completely accept it. It's a wonderful device. I was very happy to experience this. You write in a much more physical way than other writers do. It's less abstract somehow. You have a body in your text somehow by doing this. I found it remarkable, yeah.
Thank you. Another question from the audience?
Hi. My question is for Ms. Evaristo as well. First of all, I really loved the book. I am Ghanaian Dutch, but I lived in London last year. So when I was reading it and coming across places that you mentioned in the book, places that I'd walked by, I was very, just very taken aback in a good way. I have a question about the Booker Prize that you won, and I can understand if you maybe do not want to answer. But I, as a Black woman who is a very big fan of literature work and reading, I was very upset about you having to share the prize. And I know a lot of other Black book clubs or Black women that read a lot were very upset. And you were saying earlier that you didn't necessarily see it as like half a prize because you still got that recognition and still got, the attention. But I do wonder, do you understand like the kind of resentment that it kind of brought for, I guess, mostly non-white readers?
Yes, I can actually see you. You're the first person I can see who's asked a question, which is good. No, I totally get it. Oh, don't worry. I totally get it. It's just that from my perspective, in fact, because there were two of us and because there was this controversy about it, I think it actually enhanced my career. But if it wasn't me winning it, I would feel the same as you. That actually, if there are there are two of us up for this prize, and if a Black woman is worth winning it, then she should have got it on her own. And if it wasn't me, then I would feel the same. And I totally understand the people out there and lots of people from my community who feel that and who felt cheated and feel really angry about it. But I can only want to talk about it from my perspective. Mm-hmm. And I only want to see it as a positive thing as well. I don't want to turn it into something negative personally. And also with Margaret Atwood, who is such a heroic figure in so many ways, I want it to be seen as just a positive thing. But I get it. Don't worry, I get it.
Maybe it's a consolation that the Nobel Prize is very often given to two people at the same time.
But you know something? The Nobel Prize went to Toni Morrison in 1991 or 93. Yeah. And it's never gone to a Black woman since. So the Nobel is a prize for, not for Black women, let's put it that way.
Yes, sure.
Well, actually, we have to end this evening, but I think I have one last question because we really wanted to have a publisher here. also because we, well, this talk is also about diversity in the literary world, but they couldn't make it. So, but I think, and I actually know that some publishers are watching, some Dutch publishers, so I'm wondering about diversity in the literary world. What is your message to them, to the publishers?
Asking me?
Yes, now I'm talking to you.
Oh, so I think it's the duty of the publishing industry to publish a broad range of literature that come from and speak to a really diverse range of communities. And I think it's the duty of the publishing industry to diversify their workforce at every level, not just at entry level, but at every level, at commissioning editor level, you know, marketing, publicity, because they're very powerful in publishing houses, certainly in the UK now. It just needs to happen. It just needs to happen. And the publishing industry in the UK, I think they've got it now since Black Lives Matter, but it's been a very slow process, although there have been various initiatives over the years. And I think they have to realize that actually there is also an economic argument for publishing works that speak to a really broad range of people, as well as a moral argument. Yes. And it needs to happen. And if it's not happening in Holland, it needs to happen. It needs to happen now. You don't need to have a focus group. You don't need to have commission reports. You just need to start making sure that when you employ people, that you're employing people who have understandings of certain communities, and that you publish, you know, the great or good, doesn't have to be great, good literature that comes from different communities. And like, I think the thing about Girl, Woman, Other, it may be about a particular set of demographics in the UK, but it's also universal. It speaks to many people.
Yeah, before I'm going to thank you, it would be a nice way, I want to end this evening with a poet, because it's the poet that's on the start of the story of Grâce. So I want to ask Grâce, and I think that it's a good way to end this evening, because it's about diversity actually and stories. So I want to ask Grâce to read this poet from Langston Hughes.
Oh yeah, so I'm going to read out a poem by Langston Hughes.
Poem, sorry.
Yeah. So it's part of the story that I wrote. So it's the segment of it, and it's called Ansu's Stories. Ansu has a head full of stories. Ansu has a whole heart full of stories. Summer nights on the front porch, Ansu cuddles a brown-faced child to her bosom, and tells him stories. And the dark-faced child, listening, knows that Ansu's stories are real stories. He knows that Ansu never got her stories out of any book at all, but that they came right out of her own life.
Thank you so much. And now I want to wish you all a nice evening. I want to thank Jetty Mathurin. I want to thank Maaike Meijer. I want to thank Grâce Ndjako. And most of all, of course, I want to thank you from the UK, Bernardine Evaristo. Thank you so much.
Thank you for tuning in, everybody.
Ja,
okay. There we go. Bye.